Breaking news this Monday night, international murder for hire. Accusations Iran recruited 2 Canadians to carry out assassinations in the U.S.
This politicization of hitman is really terrifying.
What we know about the suspects and the targets. Avenging the killing of 3 American soldiers.
We are not looking for a war with Iran.
How Washington will respond. Not ready why a decision to expand assisted death to those with mental illness has been delayed. And new examples of meddling in Canada, the revelations as the foreign interference inquiry gets underway.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with a murder for hire plot revealed by the U.S. Justice Department that involves charges against 2 Canadian men accused of plotting to kill an Iranian defector living in the U.S. The U.S. indictment unsealed today names 2 men, one a member of the Hells Angels in B.C. It alleges they conspired with an Iranian man through an encrypted messaging service to recruit hitmen to travel to the U.S. and carry out the killing of 2 people in Maryland. The U.S. Justice Department says it's a part of a troubling trend of transnational repression in which operatives from countries including Iran and China target dissidents and defectors on foreign soil. Eric Sorensen has our top story tonight.
The U.S. Justice Department calls it an international murder-for-hire scheme, an assassination plot by Iranian intelligence to kill a defector and woman living in Maryland near Washington, and hired 2 Canadian men to carry it out. Naji Sharifi Zindashti is accused of running a criminal network targeting dissidents at the behest of Iran's Ministry of Intelligence and Security to silence the Iranian regime's perceived critics. U.S. officials allege Zindashti recruited Damion Ryan, a member of the Hells Angels in B.C., and that Ryan recruited Adam Richard Pearson, another Hells Angels member, to carry out the attack. According to the indictment, Pearson promised to recruit others, texting Ryan that he would encourage the recruits to shoot the victim in the head a lot to make example, that he would tell them, "We gotta erase the head from the torso." Kim Boland has investigated many cases involving Canadian gang members.
To see sort of the involvement of even low-level Canadian gangsters, BC gangsters, is really frightening. We know there's been a lot of violence amongst gangs in the drug trade, but sort of this politicization of hitman is really terrifying.
U.S. authorities say Zindashti and the Canadians used an encrypted messaging service to orchestrate the plot that began in late 2020. In early 2021, Zindashti was prepared to pay $350,000 U.S. For U.S. authorities, it's a case that predates recent Middle East tensions, showing Iran's efforts to repress dissidents and critics both inside and outside the country. This analyst says it is a wake-up call for Canadian authorities.
Reality has now set in that we've lost such control of our impact on transnational organized crime that we're so far behind that these individuals are almost operating with impunity.
The Justice Department says the FBI is investigating the case with valuable assistance from the RCMP and CSIS, the Canadian Security and Intelligence Service. Both Canadians are already in custody in Canada on unrelated charges, Ryan on firearms charges, and Pearson was arrested in the U.S. 3 years ago and extradited to Canada in an Alberta murder case. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
The U.S. has now identified the 3 American Army Reserve soldiers killed in a drone attack on a U.S. military outpost in Jordan. At least 30 others were injured in that attack, which happened while many service members were sleeping. American officials accuse Iran of having its fingerprints on the attack, and President Joe Biden has vowed to retaliate. The question is when and how. Jackson Proskow is watching this in Washington tonight. Jackson.
Hi, Donna. What happens next is an open question after the U.S. military suffered its worst loss of life in one incident since the fall of Afghanistan. The attack happened at an outpost known as Tower 22 in Jordan, near the border with Syria. The U.S. says the base supports U.S. special operations against the so-called Islamic State. Initial reports suggest air defenses may have missed the unmanned attack drone because it struck at the same time an American drone was returning to base. Tonight, the U.S. is blaming Iranian-backed militia groups while saying Iran has its fingerprints on the attack. U.S. President Joe Biden is receiving regular briefings and is said to be weighing his options. The White House says a response will come at a time and in a manner of Biden's choosing.
We are not looking for a war with Iran. We are not seeking a conflict with the regime. in a military way. And as I said in the opening, we're not looking to escalate here. This attack over the weekend was escalatory. Make no mistake about it. And it requires a response. Make no mistake about that.
Neither the White House nor the Pentagon would discuss potential options for retaliation. It's a difficult balancing act because the U.S. is unequivocal that Iran bears some degree of responsibility. The Americans are looking to deter future attacks and send a message to Tehran without provoking a full-on war. There have been at least 160 attacks on U.S. troops in the region since October 7th, some causing serious injuries to American troops. But this is the first one to cause fatalities. Donna?
Okay, Jackson Proskow in Washington, thanks. How to handle foreign countries and agents who interfere in domestic affairs is a growing question for democracies everywhere, including Canada. The long-awaited public inquiry into foreign interference got underway in Ottawa today. It's looking into how countries like China, Russia, Iran, and India may have interfered in Canadian democratic processes. And as David Akin reports, Global News has just learned of a new case of possible Chinese interference. David.
Well, Donna, one of the reasons the government convened this inquiry is because of reporting Global News did and continues to do about foreign interference in Canadian political affairs. Case in point, Global News has learned that the federal government ordered a Chinese woman deported last August after immigration officials concluded she was working for the government of Communist China to try to silence criticism and dissent by members of the Chinese diaspora here in Canada. The Immigration and Refugee Board ruled that the woman had worked for the Overseas Chinese Affairs Office and that organization, quote, was and remains involved in espionage against PRC's targeted individuals and groups in Canada. For privacy reasons, federal authorities cannot say if the deportation order has been carried out. The judge overseeing the public inquiry into foreign interference acknowledged the role Global News and others have had in putting foreign interference on the public agenda.
Given the importance of protecting our democracy, these allegations have sparked significant debate and discussion, both at the political level and in the media.
Global News and other news organizations have legal standing at this inquiry.
We will be here to make sure and defend the right of the public to information.
That could be a challenge. Consider this. Just 0.5% of all the exhibits tabled at the Emergencies Act inquiry were classified top secret, 0.5%. For this foreign interference inquiry, 80% of all exhibits are top secret or higher.
Transparency is necessary to ensure Canadians have confidence in their elections. Canadians have the right to know what happened, how their government responded, and the ongoing threats that may persist.
And so that is the Commission's first key task, sorting out the rules around handling top secret information. It's a task that could take most of the week. Donna.
All right, David Akin in Ottawa, thank you. The federal government says the country is not ready to expand eligibility for medically assisted death to people whose sole medical condition is a mental illness.
The system needs to be ready, and we need to get it right. And it's clear from the conversations we have that the system is at this time not ready and therefore need more time.
Health Minister Mark Holland said it is not a matter of if, but when those suffering from severe mental illness will have access to medically assisted death. The expansion was set to take place on March 17th. New legislation will now be drafted in the coming days to push that deadline back further. Also on the agenda today, as Parliament resumed, the cost of living and housing.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The government is under increasing pressure to address Canada's housing crunch and affordability. It already announced a temporary cap on international student visas, and today the government said it will offer low-cost loans to builders and post-secondary schools to encourage the construction of student housing. Mackenzie Gray looks at how the measures are intended to work.
Mr. Trudeau, are you trying to rebrand this?
After a 6-week break, parliamentarians picked up where they left off.
Oral questions.
Bickering over just about everything.
Why does this government wait until things are at a breaking point before acting?
Will you at least allow Canadians to heat their homes without his tax?
Is abolishing the United Nations now the official position of the Conservative Party of Canada?
Bonjour tout le monde.
But outside the House of Commons, a more civil tone.
This is going to be a major change in approach in a few different ways.
as the Liberals put forward yet another policy to try and close the housing supply gap.
Colleges and universities will be eligible to use the apartment construction loan program to build housing on or off campus.
That program will give post-secondary institutions access to over $15 billion worth of low-cost government loans in a bid to build student housing.
We're all in a bit of a crisis right now, so anything that can help universities to increase the number of low-cost units for students will be good for the students, good for the universities, and good for the communities.
And fixing the housing crisis is central to turning around the Liberals' political fortunes. Exclusive polling for Global News done by Ipsos Research lists housing as the third most important issue for Canadians, only behind cutting the cost of groceries and inflation and interest rates, pocketbook problems that are sticking to the Prime Minister.
The difficulty for the Liberal Party is it is 100% identified with Justin Trudeau. Right now, he is definitely a drag on the Liberal Party ticket.
That's given Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives a 9-point lead in the polls, despite only presenting a handful of economic policies.
Poilievre has not presented one damn economic policy since it's been there.
Regardless of how many housing plans the Liberals put forward, experts have consistently said it will take at least 2 years before their impact is felt on the housing market, Donna, well after when the next election will be.
Okay, Mackenzie in Ottawa, thanks. RCMP in Manitoba say a man in British Columbia has been charged with the murder of 24-year-old Crystal Saunders, who was killed 17 years ago.
Unfortunately, Crystal was a vulnerable person, and someone took advantage of that. We now have that person in custody.
42-year-old Kevin Charles Q was arrested Saturday in Surrey, BC. He will be taken back to Winnipeg to face a second-degree murder charge. Saunders' body was found in April of 2007, northwest of Winnipeg. Attacks and counterattacks coming up, the fears of those living along the Lebanon-Israel border. Negotiators from Qatar, Egypt, and Israel are said to be making progress on a new deal to release more of the hostages taken by Hamas on October 7th. Qatar's prime minister says negotiators plan to present a proposed framework to Hamas leadership. It involves a 45-day pause in fighting, more aid to Gaza, and the release of 4,000 Palestinians from Israeli detention. In exchange, Hamas would release 35 to 40 Israeli hostages, possibly more, in succeeding phases. Israeli news outlets report Israel is open to the plan, but nothing has been agreed to, and Hamas has reiterated Israel must end its assault for more hostages to be released. The UN Relief Agency for Palestinian Refugees, known as UNRWA, warns the situation in Gaza is desperate as more countries suspend funding after allegations 12 of its staff were involved in the October 7th Hamas attack. The UN agency warns if funding doesn't resume soon, its aid work won't be able to continue beyond February. Around 1 million Palestinians in Gaza, displaced by Israel's siege, rely on UNRWA for shelter. The U.S. National Security spokesperson warned today not to impugn the good work of a whole agency because of the potential bad actions by a small number of people. In Israel, thousands of people, including ministers from Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government, attended a far-right conference last night calling for Israel to resettle Gaza and the occupied West Bank. That's Israel's national security minister. He and the finance minister were there. They reiterated calls for Palestinians to be removed from Gaza, claiming without settlement, there is no security. Netanyahu has said there are no plans to permanently occupy Gaza, but insists that Israel will maintain security control for an indefinite period. And beyond the crisis in Gaza, fighting between Israeli forces and Hezbollah militants is heating up along the Israeli-Lebanon border. The Israeli Defense Forces released footage of airstrikes on what it says are Hezbollah military posts throughout southern Lebanon. Both sides have been trading fire for months since the October 7th attacks on Israel, and that has left border communities on edge. Danielle Hamamdjian visited 2 Israeli kibbutzes near the border with Lebanon.
It's a brief, serene moment, but at any second, rocket fire could tear through this rainbow. Just beyond, a few hundred meters away, lies southern Lebanon.
And this kibbutz has been hit multiple times.
Yes.
Where locals here say Hezbollah fighters, backed by Iran, are watching closely. They point to a hilltop military position perched right above on the Lebanese side.
You cannot raise children here when they go in the morning to the kindergarten and you're afraid that a rocket will hit the kindergarten.
We're in Kibbutz Malkiah, where that kindergarten has been turned into army barracks. This is one of the closest Israeli communities to the Lebanese border. Peacetime population 500 these days. A ghost town.
In normal days you hear sounds of kids running around here. I hear sounds of bombs.
This is Israel's response to an earlier attack by Hezbollah. In fact, this has been the soundtrack of daily life in northern Israel since October 7th. Back and forth attacks and counterattacks with a militant group that has warned it is not afraid of war with Israel. Where forces have been intensifying drills, preparing for combat.
These communities are in direct line of fire, so close to the Lebanese border they can hear the sound of missiles and rockets coming in before the air raid sirens can even sound.
Hezbollah is believed to be 10 times stronger than Hamas, and a full-scale attack could easily overwhelm Israel's missile defense system.
An Iron Dome will not take care of 4,000 rockets on residential areas. It's a great weapon. We're really proud of it. It's not a real Iron Dome. We're not in Hollywood.
In Kibbutz Sasa, hardly anything could have stopped the anti-tank missile that hit the auditorium just a few weeks ago. Angelica Kalolivne, an Italian-Israeli, is a theater teacher here.
This is the way to my house. We can't go in this.
What do you fear?
We fear that they see us because all the time they see with the, with it, and all the time they can shoot.
A greater fear is that what Hamas did on October 7th in the south could be replicated by Hezbollah in the north. Danielle Hamamjin, Global News on the Israeli-Lebanese border.
Turbulent times ahead. Why Flair Airlines has landed in hot water with the CRA. French farmers call it a siege of Paris. They have paralyzed routes into the French capital, blocking main arteries with hundreds of tractors and mounds of hay bales. Farmers say they're being hit by falling incomes, more environmental regulations, rising red tape, and competition from imports. 15,000 police officers have been mobilized to try to control the protest. The French government says new measures to help farmers will be announced on Tuesday. Some turbulent times for Flair Airlines. The Canada Revenue Agency has obtained a court order to seize and sell the budget carrier's property. Court documents show Flair owes $67.2 million in unpaid taxes. The money relates to import duties on the 20 Boeing 737 MAX airplanes that make up its fleet. Flair CEO Stephen Jones says the company has a deal with the CRA to pay off the money owed, and that the court order obtained in November has no real impact on the airline's operations. Fighting a potential deadly disease. Next, British Columbia's innovative efforts to eradicate cervical cancer. There's some royal news tonight. Both the Princess of Wales and King Charles are back home after undergoing medical procedures. Kensington Palace says Kate Middleton is recovering at home after a nearly 2-week hospital stay and is making good progress. She had abdominal surgery to treat an undisclosed non-cancerous condition. And King Charles waved as he left the same private London hospital. He spent 3 nights being treated for an enlarged prostate. British Columbia is rolling out a new way to screen for cervical cancer. Instead of the invasive Pap test done in a doctor's office, at-home test kits are now available to screen for strains of HPV, the leading cause of cervical cancer. Heather Yurix-West explains how it works and why it could help eradicate the disease.
Christina Price is a cervical cancer survivor. She was diagnosed early thanks to a test kit she administered at home.
No. I don't think I would have caught it because I wasn't scheduled for my regular Pap examination for about another year. So I don't know how fast it progresses or how much it would have progressed.
Price's early diagnosis came from participating in BC's pilot study on the home cervical cancer screening kits. The study so successful, the tests are now available to all patients as long as they live in BC.
I actually think it's a really exciting project, major step forward, especially from the standpoint of prevention of cervical cancer.
Dr. Gregory Nelson would like to see the kits made available to patients across the country. The Pap test is usually performed by a family doctor, but in many areas of Canada, family physicians are in short supply. The Pap is also invasive and can be difficult for those who have experienced trauma or sexual abuse.
There are approximately 1,300 cases of cervical cancer in Canada per year, and over 400 women die from cervical cancer,
making it one of the fastest growing cancers in Canada. But it doesn't have to be. With early detection, cervical cancer is easily treated and often cured. It's also preventable. Last week, research out of Scotland found 0 cases of cervical cancer among those who had been fully vaccinated against HPV.
Which is, a very dramatic finding. I think just further attesting that, that there's a really high importance to patients receiving the HPV vaccine.
It's why education, awareness, and access is so important. So tools available to eradicate this disease are utilized by all. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
And that is Global National for this Monday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is a snowflake in Edmonton. Just 50 days left until spring. We'd love to see Your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.